Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata cha Pita Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Vidyam Vadyam Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So if you will pause just a moment, please, Mark.
We're on page 145, second verse.
Will you help us out, please?
Te cha punya pape paschatapam janayatah sa cha tapah shrutyanuthyate kimaham sadhu nakaravam kimaham papakaravam iti. And these virtue and vice cause remorse, which the Shruti describes thus. Why have I not done the right? Why have I done the sinful? From Taittiriya Upanishad.
I'm not sure what the topic is that we're dealing with. Let's move on and see if we can find the theme of this thinking. It's been a bit.
Yadyaso punya purusheshu muditam bhavayet tada tadvasanaya swayameva pramattah punyeshu pravartate tatha papeshu peksham bhavayan swayamapi papannivarteta ataha paschatapasya bhavena chittam prasiddhati sukhishu maitrim bhavayato na kevalam raga nivrittihi kim tvasuyeshardayo api nivartante guneshu dosha vishkarana masuya paragunanama sahana mirsya yada maitri vashta parakyam sukham स्वकीयमेव सम्पद्यते तदा परगुणेषु कथमसूयादिकसं भवेत्। एवं दोषान्तरनिवृत्तिरपि यथा मुन्नेया दुःखीषु करुणां भावयतः शत्रुवधादिकरो द्वेषो यदा निवर्तते तदा प्रतियोगिकस्व सुखित्व प्रयुक्तो दर्पोऽपि निवर्तते। स च दर्प आसुर सम्पद्यहंकार प्रस्तावे पूर्वं निरूपितः। If he practices sympathetic complacency on virtuous persons, then by that desire he sets himself carefully to righteous acts. In the same manner, by practicing indifference towards the sinful, he becomes free from sins. Therefore, because of the absence of compunction, the chitta becomes pure. By exercising friendly thought to the happy, not only is attachment got rid of, but also malice and envy and the like. Malice, slanderous malignities, asuya, is finding fault in virtue, and envy, irsha, is impatience in another's virtue. When by the influence of friendly thoughts, another's happiness becomes truly one's own, then there remains no scope for finding fault, etc., with others' virtue. Thus, getting rid of the other vices as well by the same way may be understood accordingly. When hate, the cause of killing the enemies, etc., is removed from the mind by compassionate thoughts towards the miserable, then pride also is eliminated, which is caused by happiness, the opposite of misery. This pride was earlier described in connection with ego in the demoniac endowments thus.
At the end?
That's the end.
Okay, so basically to try to condense all this into something simpler that we can understand, we have a process here. In the beginning, the ego who suffers is convinced, I am unhappy because external circumstances are not right. People are wrong, politics is wrong, the economy is wrong, my health is wrong, that's why I'm unhappy. And the opposite idea. Today I am unhappy because people are good to me, the politics are the way I want them, I made a lot of money, all these sorts of things. This is what we call bhoga, living a way of life based on enjoyment. The problem with it is that it's always temporary, it's always finite, and to the degree that we get attached, it leaves vasana and compels us further and further into ego-prompted activity. Now, it's interesting. I had a conversation with someone this week, and they were ghosted by someone on a dating app. And then they spent the whole morning thinking, why am I so alone? What's wrong with me? Will I never find a partner? And when we were talking, I suggested that, self-pity is a klesha. Self-pity is a character defect. yeah, but I like it. And so what became evident was that the self-pity itself was something that he found enjoyable. And so many of us find some sort of, frankly, a sick kind of pleasure in identifying with our misery, with perhaps negative things that have happened to us in childhood in the past. So the thing that's amazing, we can get attached not only to the pleasurable things in life, but we can become identified and attached to the unpleasant. If that is so, if we're identified and attached to our misery, what do we usually do? Let me tell you about my misery. And then when someone else says, oh, yes, oh, that's so terrible, that makes us feel comforted, understood. We want to hang on to it. It becomes a way of connecting to other people. No blame. This is just what ego does. So, what does the tradition suggest? Well, if we're really deeply, deeply identified, we have what today we would call forms of mental and emotional illness. The tradition suggests intense spiritual devotion and selfless service. Of course, these are the days before antidepressants and stuff like that. But once we begin to start on the path, the first step that is suggested, this is what Vidyaranya is talking about, is what I would call thought replacement. We practice what we call Sakshi Bhava, practice witnessing our thoughts and feelings. I am not my thoughts and feelings, I am the witness of them. Now, to a large degree, awareness is 90% of healing. You begin to see, oh, that's just a pattern. And feelings are frequently not based in any external reality. It's just the force of the past. So what we endeavor to do is replace ill will with compassion or kindness. This is a very Buddhist kind of concept. The idea that if I'm filled with anger or resentment or hurt feelings or revenge, I need to take up the discipline of intending the well-being of the other. Pray for them for 30 days every day. Jim, I can't do it. I don't feel it. I can say the words, I wish you well, may you be happy, may you be peaceful, may you be liberated. But what I really want is for you to drop dead. Don't worry. We start by just saying the words. And let me tell you the science behind this. If we look at the word mantra, I just found this out recently, the past month or so. So part of the word is the Sanskrit root tra, which means a vehicle. We have ratra, yantra, and mantra. So a mantra, which is vach, it's speech, is a vehicle for the mind. Manas. Mantra. Why? Because most of us, there are some exceptions, tend to think in words. We have an inner dialogue. Logos, dialogue. So we start by just saying, you don't have to believe it. You don't have to feel it. Start by just saying it. Turn the mind away from habituated negative thinking towards positive thinking. Thought replaced. Now, there's a whole field of psychology called behavior modification. Did you study this in shrink school?
In undergrad, yeah.
Tell us what behavior modification is.
Basically, it's a system of rewards and punishments designed to change your behavior.
Give us an example.
The most classic example is like Pavlov's dogs.
Well, use a person. How would you? What give me an example, a hypothetical of how they would work with a person?
For example, with kids, right? Like a common thing is if you want to see a certain behavior, you either praise it or you punish a behavior that you don't want to see. So with kids, like if they're misbehaving and you want them to quiet down, one way to do that is by pointing out to like one child who's actually sitting down and being quiet and saying, "Oh, look at this, so and so is sitting down. Thank you so much for sitting down." And that usually encourages the other kids to settle down.
So you start by changing behavior and the mind will follow. Now, there are two-way systems. Some people say change your thinking and the behavior will change. Other systems say no, change the behavior and the thinking will change. You know what yoga says? Yes. Use both. But you can't just sit in the armchair with the negative thinking and the negative behavior, hoping that God will strike you virtuous. It takes some tapas. It takes some tapas. Now, what we say is we don't have a lot of control over that first thought. But what we work on is not getting caught up in the theme of our thinking, going down the rabbit hole of a story. What do? We turn our mind consciously and with effort in the beginning, with God's help, into another direction. This is why I'm so fond of the Tibetan Buddhist practice of Tonglen. So let's say there's someone that you're angry at. And they're being a rascal. Well, you can start by breathing in their rascal behavior, keeps us from fighting and resisting. And then breathe out peace and healing. You can do it for yourself. You can breathe in your own anger and resentment and hurt feelings. Breathe out peace, goodwill. You can expand it to all the rascals in the world. Breathe in their suffering. Breathe out peace. You keep it up until you get to this place where there's no longer a charge. I like it because it's somatic. You can hook it with something you're doing all the time, the breath. Now, what Vidyaranya is ultimately going to say is that's only one step. And you can never completely end the kleshas of the mind. The mind, by definition, has come into existence because of spiritual ignorance. We can come to a point where we're no longer tyrannized by it, where the volume level goes way, way down. But only the self is perfect. Swamiji used to say, the mind is a sewer. So the next stage in the process is we step back. And when virtuous or vicious thoughts arise, we have no concern for them. They are asat, not real. We don't feed them with a belief in their reality. This is the deeper practice of this samadrishta, this equality of vision. Now, let's say you have some particular syndrome. And you can go to the psychotherapist and you can understand why, for example, everybody you date turns out to be an addict or an alcoholic or an abusive person. That clarity can be useful. But oftentimes it doesn't stop the issue. We still have to do the tapas. This is why I'm very fond of the Sutra of Patanjali at the beginning of his second chapter. Tapas Swadhyayeshwara Pradhana Kriya Yoga. I like to take it from the inside out. Here, Swadhyaya does not mean study of the scripture. It means a psychological inventory. I make friends with, become familiar with my own kleshas, my own doshas. Oh yeah, I have control issues. I have a need to be right. I have judgment of other people. I'm fearful about money. You can make the list of your own major issues. Then we back up. Tapas. Tapas, usually translated as austerity, but it means at this level of our practice, turning the mind away from that habituated thought pattern into a more conducive one. Here he's talking about if I have ill will, move it towards goodwill. Very Buddhist in that sense. Practice these virtues. I don't feel it, Jim. Doesn't matter. Start by saying the words, and the mind will follow. Because that's how some of these issues got in there in the first place. So someone has terrible low self-esteem. They think they're a terrible, unlovable person. Why do you think they think that? Because that was a message they probably got from their family of origin as a child. It was words and behavior. And probably the abuse didn't happen just once. It was over and over and over again. They got the message. They're not lovable. You're a broken human being. Remember the ruthless rule of the mind. Whatever you look at, you're going to think about. What you look at repeatedly, you're going to think about repeatedly. Repeated thought becomes habituated thought. Habituated thought sinks into the unconscious and becomes the law of my life. By that last stage, I don't even realize I'm acting on it. Any thoughts on this? There's no magic bullet. There's no secret mantra that's going to get rid of it. There's no pill you can take that's going to make it stop. We have to do the work. With God's help, Ishvara Pranidhana, trustful surrender to God. Any thoughts on this? Now, my suggestion is don't believe it. It is simply a mental health hypothesis. But what I would recommend is be a spiritual scientist. Remember, as a spiritual scientist, our laboratory is in our own minds, our own lives. Try it for not just a day, but for several months. Give it a shot. See if it begins to make a difference. Any thoughts on this? Thought replacement, followed by detaching from the mind itself. Ram Dass used to talk about this. He would say, you got to be somebody before you're nobody. Carl Jung used to say, only a healthy ego dies. All right, next verse.
Ishwaro aham bhogi siddhoham balavan sukhi arhyo bhijanavansmi konyo stit sadrisho maya. I am the Lord. I enjoy. I am successful, powerful, and happy. I am rich and well born. Who else is equal to me? Bhagavad Gita.
That's from the Divine and Devilish Estate, 17th chapter, I think it is.
16th. Yeah.
16th chapter. Okay. Is that the end of the
That's
verse?
the end of that.
So this is the person who's caught up not in the low self-esteem, but in the asura mentality. I'm better than other people. Now listen carefully. Usually a mind that is stuck on repeating that all the time. It's like whistling in the dark. It means underneath that, probably low self-esteem. So pride can be arrogance or low self-esteem. They are both forms of the mind's attempt to inflate, build up, secure ego. Hardest place for the ego to situate. I'm a fellow among fellows. I'm a worker among workers. My mind is just like everybody else's. It's always the attempt to be terminally unique, just a little bit better than everybody, or I'm worse than everybody. So we start, nope, you're human. Start with the assumption that your mind is basically just like everybody else's. Then I am not the mind, I am not the feelings, I am not the body. Chidananda Rupam, Shivoham, Shivoham. I am this consciousness, not the equipment at all. Let's see what he says next.
Nanu punyatmasu muditam bhavayatah punya pravrittihi phalatvainokta sa cha yogino na yukta malinayam shastravasanaayam punya mantarbhavya purvamudahyata tvat maivam punarjanma karanasya kamyeshta purtadestatra malinatveno daharanat iha tu yogabhyasa janya mashukla krishna tvena janmana padakam punyam vivikshitam ashukla krishna tvam Patanjali Sutraya Mas. Objection. It has been said that the application of sympathetic complacency towards the virtuous results in virtuous activity, and that does not befit the yogis, since it was earlier described as included in the impure desire of learning. Reply. This need not be so, for there the Ishtapurta karma performed with desire and leading to rebirth was mentioned as impure. But here, that virtue is intended which does not lead to rebirth, because it has become neither black nor white by the practice of yoga. Neither white nor black is mentioned by Patanjali thus.
So the idea here again is, well, if I focus on being virtuous, having suhecha, auspicious desires, I want to be kind, I want to be generous, I want to be gentle, I want to practice non-injury, etc. Won't I be setting up a future lifetime of being a goody-goody? And it all depends on the intention. If I'm wanting to be a goody-goody for the purpose of the esteem of my fellows, absolutely correct. But if my intention is developing a sattvic mind so that I can further practice for the attainment of moksha, then we're going in the right direction. A sattvic mind is essential for fruitful self-inquiry. A mind that is polluted with desire, revenge, depression, etc. Not fit. We need to do this. Again, it's a sequence. First this, then that. And actually, it's even there in the Christian monastic tradition. We have what they call the active life. If you're a monk or a nun, you spend time in the beginning tilling the fields, making cheese or wine, teaching little kids. You have an active life. And then when you've done that for a while, the mind naturally begins to turn inward. And you enter what's called the contemplative life, where the mind desires quiet, silence, etc. It's the natural course of how the spiritual life moves. All right, going on.
Karma Shukla Krishnam Yoginatspri Vidha Mitaresham Iti Kamyam Karma Vihitatva Shuklam Nishidham Krishnam Mishram Shukla Krishnam Tade Tatra Mitareshama Yoginam Sampadyate Tacha Trividham Janma Prayaschati Tada Hurvishwarupa Charya. Works are neither white nor black for the yogis. For others, they are threefold: black, white, and mixed. From the Yoga Sutras. Motivated work being prescribed is white, pure. Prohibited one is black, and the mixed one is white and black. So these three happen to other people who are non-yogis and bring about three kinds of birth. This has been said by Vishwarupacharya thus.
So the idea is for the person who's identified as the transmigrating soul with the Sukshma Sharira, they're concerned with, justifiably so, good actions, bad actions, and some that are a combination of the two. One of the things we can find out about our own human nature, times when we hide a negative motivation behind a good one. We want to teach someone a lesson. Well, this is for their own good. I'm just being vengeful. We gossip. Well, I want people to understand what I've been through and what that person is really like. No, it's just character assassination. These are these mixed motives that many of us have. So in the beginning, again, we try to limit the kleshas that arise. Don't act on them. Just because I have a feeling doesn't mean I have to take an action. If I'm really, really angry, walk away. Don't hurt people. Simple, not easy. White and black and mix. But for the yogi, now remember, the yogi has probably gone through several years of practice of modifying their behavior, disciplining the mind for auspicious thoughts rather than ill will towards the world. As I said earlier, the mind by definition is finite. Its very existence is caused by spiritual ignorance. Don't expect something of the equipment that it's incapable of. To try to have perfect equipment, body, mind, intellect, is like trying to count to the highest number. You never get there. That's not an excuse for bad behavior. But in the beginning, focus on the white actions and thoughts, not the black and not the mixed. But for the yogi, get out. Swamiji used to thunder, shut up and get out. Didn't mean walk out of the satsang. Stop your mind. Get out of the mind. Be it. Now, for those of us who've been meditators for a long time, let me tell you something that's going to happen. As you burn out and become free from your own defects, your own mind states, you will begin to feel the thoughts and feelings of others as if they were your own. Because unless we're on top of a mountain and in solitude, we live in thought atmospheres. So a negative feeling arises. Well, is this out of my own karmic stream? Is this my stuff? Or am I tuning in to somebody else? Doesn't matter. In the end, we deal with it the same way. Not this, not this. We don't believe it, and we don't feed into it. Frequently, you can be quiet at peace, you go outside, and there's this wonderful German term, Zeitgeist, the spirit of the time. There can be a lot of fear in the group mind, a lot of upset. Tune into it. Oh, I'm not upset. Boy, everybody else around me sure is. And that capacity to discern the distinction between what's mine and what's other completely falls apart. It's just mine. The yogi doesn't believe any of it. Yet there's no such thing as my mind. Where did my thoughts and feelings and impressions and patterns come from? All of it's just mind stuff. Any thoughts on this? I think married couples experience this. So have you ever come home from work and you just know your partner's having an issue? Have you had that feeling?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have to say a word, but you can feel it. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel it? Because, as well as the 5 outer senses, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin, the mind itself is a sense organ. What does it sense? Thought atmospheres. All right, next verse.
Shubhe prapnoti devatvam nishid narikim gatim abhyayam punyapapabhyam manushyam labhate shvashaha. By good acts, godhood is attained, and by deeds that are prohibited is consigned to perdition. And by both good and evil together reaches perforce the human state. From Nashkaryam Siddhi.
So here he's talking about a little bit of yoga, cosmology. There are heaven realms and hell realms in the human realm. So if through a life you accrue punya, merit, you will go to a heaven realm, punya loka. If, on the other hand, you are a rascal and you do prohibited actions, lie, cheat, and steal, you'll go to papalok, one of the Naraka, one of the hell realms. But most of us are a combination of the two. And where do we end up? Manusha loka, the human realm. Now, understand, liberation does not take place in either punya loka or papa loka. only takes place in the human realm, because there we can ask the questions. What's it all about? Is there any purpose to my life? What is suffering? What causes it? Is there a way to be permanently free from suffering? We're hitting all the green lights of life. We're in Punyalok. Nobody asks those questions. But when things start to change, you're making $500,000 a year at Google, and then you get laid off. And you go from Punyalok to Papalok. Oh my God, what am I gonna do? I've got all these bills. Fight and flight and freeze. Till we get to the human realm. Maybe attachment to success and power. Isn't what it's cracked up to be. All right, next verse.
Nanu yogasyani siddhatvad krishnatve api vihitatva che. Objection. Although yoga is not black, since it is not prohibited, but it must be white, since it is prescribed, how then is it said to be neither white nor black?
Okay, so by white, we mean we engage in activities for the purpose of a successful life. Well, yoga will give us that. Krishna says this knowledge gives us dominion over this world and the beyond. The yogi tends to be more successful in the world. Swamiji used to call it the man of knowledge downtown. But that's not the purpose of it. The purpose is moksha. Shut up and get out. Let's see what Vidyaranya says.
Vaivam akamyatvabhiprayena shukla tvabhidhanat ato ashukla krishno punye prakritir yogino apekshita. Reply. It is not so, because yoga is described as non-white, with the idea that it is performed without motive. Therefore, the yogis perform such virtue which is neither white nor black.
So the idea here is there are those people who will even engage in what looks like spiritual practice for the purpose of benefiting their worldly existence. What are you doing tomorrow? Oh, I'm going to take a yoga class. Yeah, I do it every other day. I do Pilates, and then I do yoga class. I do hot yoga. Why? Because I want a foxy body. I want to stay healthy. I want to keep my waistline down. I want to be able to wear nice clothes. I want arms like Michelle Obama. She gave new meaning to the right to bear arms. Or even meditation. Why do you meditate? Oh, because it gives me some peace of mind and I'm more effective in the world that way. Nothing wrong with this. And the Upanishads themselves are always putting us in touch with the benefits of the product. It's part of what they do. So they understand the drives of ego. But what Vidyaranya is saying, ultimately, that's not the purpose of the practices. It's not to make egoism and identification with the body better. It may do that. But the goal of the yogi is liberation. Jivan Mukti. The whole point of the book. Now, one of my favorite stories from the Christian Bible is the story of the prodigal son. So there's a Lord, and he has two sons. And the younger son is a little wackadoodle. And he says, Father, I don't want my inheritance when you die. I want it now. His father gets a question mark on his forehead. Says, okay, kid. Gives him money. And the kid goes off into a foreign land and squanders his inheritance with riotous living. In the end, he ends up on a dung heap and says, what a fool I've been. I'm going to go back home because even the people who harvest the fields of my father have it better than I do right now. I wrote. And I will say, Father, I've sinned against you and against God. Let me just go after the workers in the field and get the leavings that they drop. So then he turns and heads home. Even when he was a long way off, his father saw him coming, hiked up his robe and came running to meet him. Here is my son who was lost and is now found, who was dead, who is now alive. Let's have a party. So what's the symbolism of the story? Of course, the Lord is God, God consciousness. What's our inheritance? Inheritance is union with the infinite, moksha, yoga. You and I take that inheritance, consciousness, being. We head into a foreign land, which is attachment to the world of the senses. And we squander our inheritance till we're miserable, till we're despondent. And then the idea, maybe I'll try the spiritual life. We turn and go the other way. Now, what's so wonderful in the story, the second son, when he turns and heads back to his father's house, God consciousness, his motive is impure. I want stuff still. Meaning we start the spiritual path as a response to our suffering. My relationship isn't working. I hate my job. My health isn't the way I want it. I'm terrified of the political environment. Is there a way to get some peace of mind in my life? We have no other way of thinking about it other than in worldly context. No. So we start the spiritual path thinking it's a way to fix my worldly life. I'm going to have a better relationship. I'm going to have more money. I'm going to get a job I like. I'll finally get a house that I like to live in. And maybe even a fancier car. But at some point, the whole thing turns upside down. And we see that my worldly life is where I work out my attachments and my aversions. And that the goal of my life is yoga, union with. And this is again what the Master Jesus meant when he said, my kingdom, it's not of this world. Then he would say, but I'm in the world, but not of it. Now, I think in our modern Western world, people don't have this as a worldly motivation so much anymore. Thinking you get status in the world by behaving as a goody-goody. In old-timey days, if you were an observant Brahmin, then people would give you great respect and deference. In the Western world, we have some of that. People proclaim their religious conversion. I'm an Orthodox Jew and I'm going to wear all this particular way of dressing from the 17th century. Or I'm accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and I'm going to tell you about it at my Senate confirmation hearing. Who wear their virtue as a badge. Not much different than old-timey days. But it's still the motivation that I do good for worldly satisfaction. Better than being a jerk. But that's not why we practice yoga. We practice yoga for moksha, liberation from the whole world, the wheel of samsara. All right, we'll end here. What verse are we on for next time?
Second verse on page 148.
All right. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha.